real.
We need to
Yep.
be with our people, and we need to, whether or not you can really fully comprehend it or put it into words, you feel the energy when you're next to other people. Like you just feel that magnetism almost. Even if you're
Hmm.
introverted, you sort of feel that warm and fuzzy feeling that can come from a good conversation, just from being close to somebody.
There's a different kind of sickness that comes from not seeing people in the flesh. We spent years locked in, logged on, doom scrolling through a world that doesn't exist. But out there, in pubs, in living rooms, on mountaintops, at knitting circles, people are still finding each other. This is Real Meat. I'm your host, Brian Feaster. Let's go meet someone. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Real Meat podcast. And I just wanted to say I'm glad that everybody's here. Thanks for taking the time to listen as we hope to feature stories from people who are building communities around the world. I personally have a strong conviction that it's really important that we stay human, that we stay IRL, and keep meeting people in person. So on that note, Tori and I connected. She's a friend of mine. We connected through an entrepreneurs group, and she's a fellow entrepreneur, also like me, working in the event space. So I just wanted to bring her on because she's very focused on empowering and helping facilitate in-person connection, which we'll get into a bit. Tori, thanks for coming on the show.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for the invite, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to start us off, I've done this before, and I think I like to dig into people's origin story a little bit, just in terms of what got you interested in community. So, I know there's a story about how you came from the UK over to New York City, which is awesome. And before that, I wonder what kind of background did you have or interest did you have in community there in the UK where you got started in life?
Yeah. To be honest, like I've always been, I've always loved being around people. So it was maybe more the people interest than community per se. One of my most favorite jobs ever was like working in a bar. And I guess like by very nature there, you are part of a community and you see the
Totally.
same people coming, going, etc., etc. And I love that. I love the energy. But community itself really came about by accident. And I guess it was when I myself was in a new phase of my life and just sort of trying to reestablish everything and realized that I didn't really have one anymore. And so became an accidental community manager. That's the sort of short version.
Well, let's go for a little longer. When you said you realized you didn't have one anymore, maybe tell. I'm really interested in that. What do you
Hmm.
mean by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're fast forwarding through a lot at that point.
Yeah, sure,
So,
sure, sure,
we're going back. We're moving forward. I've left the UK. I've crossed the
sure, sure.
pond, so to speak, and now we're here in New York. Like I'm a recovery media exec. I've worked for many different publishers, and my last corporate job was at the New York Times. And when I got to the point where I was like, I just had this calling and I wanted to go and do my own thing. And so I
Yeah,
left. And then I
totally.
realized I didn't know anybody. And I knew that I wanted to do my own thing, but I didn't know a single founder. Like, how naive was
Yeah.
I? And I was like, well, I can't just sit at home staring out of the window at pigeons, which was literally what I was doing because it was the end of, well, I guess like halfway through COVID, or towards the end of COVID. I was like, I just have to get out of the house. And so I started hosting co-working days to meet other founders. And so I would put up a little ad on Meetup as it was at that point and hope that
Hmm.
people came. And for the very first one, we had 8 people come. And
Nice.
from there, it became the Knowledge Shop, which is the founder community. But it was a need, but the community piece in an organized manner was sort of accidental.
That's cool. Yeah, 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 I love that. The who am I to do such and such a thing? I mean, we all, as a fellow founder, I struggle with that. We all struggle with that. I've also started so many things. I don't know why I continue to say that to myself, but at the same time, it is what it is. I guess it's part of being human. But I think, when you go back a little bit, nobody, this is like a very fun rabbit trail. You talked about working at a bar, back in the UK. And before we go forward to the more, big interesting present with your work that you're doing in community today, I remember I grew up working in restaurants. I don't remember the last time I told somebody that. It doesn't come up that often. But I was like a busboy in a restaurant, and then I worked at like a fine dining establishment and that kind of thing where, man, I would work 7 a.m. to like 2 a.m. on like
Hmm.
Friday and Saturday, you know? And so
Yeah,
there's like
no,
this
those
really
shifts.
intense thing that you're trying to do with these other people, and it's interesting how it forms that kind of community because it's like it's very different from shared interests in the sense that special interest groups that are like we both love bocce ball or something like that, where the people become kind of a family in my experience,
Hmm.
you know, and it's because you're kind of struggling through this thing that you both are kind of everyone's kind of thinking like, should we really be doing this with our time? It's kind of really
Yeah.
all consuming, you know what I mean? Like working from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Hmm.
What was your experience like with that? Because I think it's an interesting version of community that's very different than special interest or we both work in tech or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of thrown into it and you're sort of bonding over adversity. And
Yeah,
that resonates entirely. The split shifts, I wouldn't be starting at 7. Sometimes I'd be starting at 10 and we'd be going through to like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And you're just there. And like one of the bars, in fact, that had a really strong community. It was this bar in the south coast of England called Jumping Jacks. And it was not only a bar, it was like live music. It was sort of a very, very early sort of honky tonk type vibe,
nice.
which for the UK was very unusual. Like country music really at that point especially wasn't a thing. But
Can I ask what year this was? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to.
this was probably like 99,
Nice.
2000.
Great. Yeah.
So way, way, way back.
Same time I was doing this work. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And so like we'd be there and we'd be dancing on the bars and they'd bring people
Nice.
up on the stage. Like I really have 2 left feet, so I was never the one on the stage, but it was just, being sort of energetic, and we'd wear, the plaid, we would call them check shirts and jeans, and it was just like a really fun vibe. And I bring that up because like so many people, like my best friend I met at that bar, and like we are still best friends to this day. And
Totally.
like been traveling together, and she has a phenomenal community through that, and so I've been able to like stay in touch with lots of other people, so it really is like phenomenal. And another piece I would say, which is maybe moving on a little bit, but like after that, whilst I graduated from university and I was looking for like my thing, I'd always wanted to go traveling. I'd never had that opportunity. And I managed to get a job as a holiday rep. And that basically meant I went overseas. They paid me to work overseas and I was selling to different people. But suddenly you're on your own again. And so the people that you're working with again become your community. And you sort of like club together, and they really are not just your community, they're your family, because at this point you're overseas as well. So again, it's another form of that sort of bonding through a crazy life experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that's cool. Yeah, I love how you never know who's going to be your friend for life. There's so many different people that we meet, and I always find that interesting. That when I think about who have I known the longest. I was thinking about two old friends yesterday, and people that I both known like 15, 20 years, and kind of lifelong friends, and no similarity in how I met them, and I think that's the beauty, right, of human connection and and
Hmm.
and sort of seeking community is that just by leaving your house, you hope that you're open to that opportunity to meet that person who just happens to really resonate with you. Like
Yeah,
the two, and you don't have to be the same person, right? You know what I mean? It's just about being open to whatever is out there, right, in terms of people. So
absolutely. I
I
went
love that.
traveling during my sort of transition from the UK to the US, spent 3 months in Central and South America, and met a couple who have become very, very close friends hiking a volcano in Guatemala. It just
Nice.
one
Yeah,
of those
yeah.
random serendipity moments.
I met a good friend literally on top of a mountain where we had not come together, and then we met at the summit, and then became friends, so very similar to your
Love
volcano
it.
story.
Yeah.
Cool, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the present. So, you mentioned your trip across the pond. You mentioned some of
Hmm.
the stuff that you're working. on in terms of community and you're kind of like
Hmm.
Brits in tech and that sort of thing. You found yourself kind of without a community after was it after leaving the New York Times? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so, you found yourself a bit without a community, okay? And so you had this first meeting, you had 8 people that showed up, which is great. I love that feeling of not knowing what's gonna happen when you put something out there for the first time like that. Where did it go from there, and, how did it grow after that?
Well, I guess the first sign of need for it was like I had just rented a WeWork meeting room. So I paid for myself. I hadn't asked for any money from people. I was just like, hey, if
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
hang with some other people, join. And everybody Venmoed me money to cover the cost of that meeting room without me asking. Like I just happened to disappear, go on a call, came back, and they had Venmoed me. And I was like, this is
nice, nice.
amazing. Clearly it's resonating. So I was like, well, maybe I should do some more because I got a lot from that just as much as clearly they had. And so I just started to regularly host them, met a load of people who became friends. We were all during this transition period as well. And then I think as people, you care about the experience and
Mhm,
making sure that people are able to connect and get the most from their time together. And so sort of fast forwarding slightly, I sort of built a tool to try and make it easier for people to connect at some of
sure,
the bigger events by
sure.
connect them over mutual interest, and that became the origin for Meet in 10.
Very cool. So, how long is the gap in that sort of fast forward that you mentioned? In other words, you start by starting a community, 8 people show up to just a random thing that you have no idea. You put it out there into the world, and great, some people showed up. And how long was it between those two events between when you started Meet in 10 to help facilitate a better
Yeah.
connection at the larger?
I would say it was probably about 3 years. I was still trying to figure out my thing. I didn't have, I'm one of life's generalists. I find it really hard to like really go all in on something because I like a lot of things. And so I was really trying to find inspiration in, okay, where am I going to focus? And so I just kept doing my thing. I kept bringing people together. I kept hosting co-working days and happy hours and bringing in great speakers. And we held this event called Fail Fest to try and normalize failure, which for founders is like really tough to psychologically handle it all the time.
Sure,
And
yeah.
then just like one thing led to another.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'd say
Yeah,
like 3 years to when I first started building the MMMVP, I would call it, and then we finally launched like a proper tech platform version of that in the summer last year.
very cool. So it's been be a year coming. It's February at the time of recording, so it'll be a year coming up in,
Yeah, like
what
July,
month did you
August.
launch? Okay, July.
I think
Yeah,
it was
cool.
July.
Yeah, congrats. It's interesting the timeline on that and the overlap too, because I've been working on my thing for like, 2 years, which has a lot of similarity both in the event
Hmm.
space and stuff like that. So, that's no surprise. Between COVID and AI, I think that the sense of urgency around in-person connection, I think people are getting it, more than they did. I mean, we didn't know AI was going to come when COVID was kind of ramping down and we were finally allowed to
Yeah.
see people again. But man, talk about a perfect complement that has the exact same, if you're thinking about it, as I am anyway, uh, like I said, I spent 20 years behind a screen, write a lot of code. I help lead, manage, mentor people, as an engineer too. I often wish that I could go back and spend more time getting out of the house, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So I love that you're, helping to facilitate that. And yeah, so tell us a little bit about Meet in 10, since we're up to that point in the story.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the one line would be, we're a business networking platform that event organizers use to help increase attendance and engagement at their events. And so, as an attendee, what that means is we recognize that not everybody is an extrovert. We recognize that not
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
has 3 hours to spend at an event. Sometimes you just need to hit the ground running and know who to talk to. And other times you just desperately want to come away from the walls, but you just don't know who to speak to or even how to say hello. And so what we do is we ask everybody specifically what they're looking to achieve from an event when they sign up. And then before they arrive, we connect them with people whose interests align so that you don't have to go in completely cold and play that guessing game. You've already got some sort of muscle memory and, frankly, a bit of a relationship before you arrive.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious in the age of, like we just said, AI everything, is there any algorithm behind that? Or is it just purely, is it hand matching based on human instinct about what people's responses are?
Yeah. I mean, yes and yes is the answer to that. So yeah, so it's a combination of like straightforward tags, categories, natural language processing, and then also the organizers themselves can basically say, using their own experience, hey, Brian, like, he loves all things events, like, you should really speak to Tori. And then they can just do a special match as well. I think even with AI, it's really interesting because you can pull and you can scrape information from all sorts of different places. It
Yeah,
doesn't
sure.
necessarily mean that information is where you are as an individual right now. I mean, the number of people that regularly
Exactly.
update their LinkedIn profiles and really share what's relevant for them. And of course, the other thing too is you go to we're all multifaceted. We all wear so many hats, and you go to one event and then you go to another event the next day, and it doesn't mean you want exactly the same thing from that event. And so we do think it's important that we give people the chance to really just share themselves what they're looking to get, rather than us trying to assume that we know that.
Yep.
Because really our sort of hypothesis around all of this is that it's actually giving people permission to talk to one another that's the hardest piece that we're struggling with right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not always can we create the strongest connection,
Interesting.
but it's how can we find the people? How can we make that conversation flow so that we can like have an amazing outcome at the end of the
Hmm.
day? And so that's really what we're trying to build around. It's how can we solve for that fundamental connection piece?
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. I want to get more into that, but I'm distracted by a nitpicky business question just because I think about, I think about things like profit margins. See, I can't help it.
Hmm.
And so it's like when you think about being an add-on to an existing event in the way that you're describing to help enhance the experience, which I think is, by the way, very cool. I love the idea. I think about like how big are these events and like how much margin is there for adding on? And then downstream of that is like, how much margin is there for you to be able to afford to do the human level curation that you're talking about, right?
Hmm.
Like, because the AI piece is, like you said, there's no guarantee that my LinkedIn profile's been updated in 10 years, right? So I get that. You know what I mean? And we don't want to just like match you without any human intervention based on like a job you don't have. You know what I mean? So that makes a lot of sense. But I guess I just wonder how you manage that. It feels like it could be a tight margin or like a bit of a challenge there, and or is it like there's lots of margin because these are like 4,000 person events and they've got lots of budget? Or anyway, sorry, I'll
Yeah.
shut up.
I mean, I think it's a great question, isn't it? It's like, how are people using us? I mean, like I said, the event organizer is the client here. And so every event organizer can be different and have different budgets and different objectives. And so some event organizers are going to be small community managers like myself who are basically doing it as almost like a volunteering type thing.
Yeah,
They just believe in the good of bringing humans together and want to pay it
right,
forward, in which
right.
case budgets are really tight. For frankly, really small events, like if it's less than 20 people, you don't need a tool like this. Like I would really trust
Yeah,
that
sure.
people just can naturally, by the strength of the host, be connected and lead to those meaningful relationships. When you start getting over that, especially if you're running them more often, then a tool like this can be really useful. And if you're thinking about budgets and margin, one of those big outlays is, the expense of food and beverage, hiring costs, all of that good stuff.
Sure,
You
yeah.
don't want money that you're spending to go to waste. And so being able to more accurately forecast attendance and to reduce the no-show piece is critical because it's really going to then help save you money in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's sort of how we think about it. But then, you go from a smaller community type organizer to then a more organized, chamber of commerce or like
Yeah.
membership type organization who are actively looking for ways to retain their members and to really show that they're adding value, because just being able to say that you're a member of something isn't good enough. Like, you really need to be able to
Mhm.
deliver ROI to them. And so
Yeah.
that's where a tool like this really comes into its own. And of course, then if you've got like hundreds or thousands of people, then it's very different again. There are always budgets, there are bigger teams, but you want to be able to manage expenses. And so if you can reduce some of that busy work around the operational side of things, around helping people to connect,
Yeah.
around, we have other tools within the platform, for example, that can help solicit questions from audience members before they arrive,
Nice.
showcasing the speakers, etc. Anything that can just help from that logistical piece can also then help the event organizer reduce their costs as well.
All right. And so I'm hoping to have an also not strictly business audience. So a little translation. She said ROI. That means return on investment. I'm just, no, but I just think about that because I can go into that mode, right? Like as a business person too. And I was just thinking like, okay. But that said, I have a burning question that you didn't quite answer, which is like, what does the actual work look like in terms of like matching people on the human side? Do you have X number of admins that do that work that are part-time employees? Or I'm just curious,
Yeah.
about like the very specific part about like, it's like, I know how, now we could talk forever about algorithms and AI matching. I do that at my day job, right? So maybe I'm biased and less interested in it, but it's like the human part. I'm curious how you scale that and how that like literally works at the practical level.
Yeah. I mean, that's really all on the organizer. So when we
Okay,
say the human person, like, that's the organizer themselves knowing their community and knowing the people there at
got
the
it.
event, and knowing that, Brian comes back time and time again previously to talk about back end coding, but now he's really interested in podcasting and he would love to speak to somebody
Sure,
who
yeah.
is an expert in the space.
That's good,
And
yeah.
so that's where the manual piece comes in. But
Okay,
again, it's all
okay, so
facilitated through the platform.
got it. Okay, so the platform facilitates it, and the owner of it though is is not somebody who works for you. You know what I mean? It's the
It's
customer.
the
So okay,
organizer. Yeah, it's
got
the
it.
customer.
Okay, got it, got it. That makes more sense. Okay, cool. So it's like interesting. Yeah, interesting. That's something to think about. I don't know what to think about that. It's like because you think about all these potentially mismatches that we talked about, and then you hope that somebody sort of intervenes. But when I think about an event that's 4,000 people, or something crazy like that, it's
Mhm.
like, well, the host can't really intervene very like they get they get the data, but they can't know 4,000 people. And so,
Yeah.
anyway, that's okay.
Yeah. I
Got it.
think when you're looking at things like that, the way I think about it is typically you'll have tiers of tickets at an event. Different people will have different
Okay, sure, yeah,
expected features bundled. And so then do you treat, VIPs slightly differently to the general
sure.
public, for example?
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So you work really closely with event organizers, and I feel like that is, um, so in my own business, I had a prior life, a prior sort of existence where I was building out in this sort of engine that powered the competitive karaoke league, which was like a multi-city organization,
Oh,
and they would come in and they would vote for the blue team or the red team. Like each person got one vote about who won and stuff like that. So
love that.
it's definitely a quirky one. I went to it and it was definitely unlike anything I've ever experienced. This big national people had flown in from Los Angeles. This happened in Washington, D.C.
I didn't
So
even know it was a
anyway,
thing.
I didn't, yeah, I mean, I didn't, I knew that, I know that people love karaoke and it's kind of it's on the uptrend. I did not know that people would fly from Los Angeles to DC to compete against one another. But anyway, I built out a whole thing that kind of was the engine that powered this. And that's part of sort of my backstory. But, and I've got other event hosting experience and stuff in my background. But the reason I just wanted to highlight that was I feel like that is often really thankless work. And I always like to get people's take on, what is that experience like? based on your fairly close relationships, I'm guessing, with people who are event hosts, what are they experiencing? How can how can we as the people who attend these events help the host?
Hmm.
What's the experience like from their side? Because I feel like a lot of people don't know what it's like to be the host on
Yeah.
who kind of runs the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's stressful. Hosting events is really stressful. And in some ways, I would almost say it's like, yeah, it's like an addictive, like love-hate relationship with it almost, once, or maybe it's like akin to giving birth. You have all of the stress and the craziness in the build-up, and then afterwards you're like, oh my God. Well, that's why here I don't have kids, but it's a really stressful, challenging, but exciting time in the build-up to it because you've got,
Yeah.
a
Yep.
blank piece of paper. You can design
I
whatever
know.
you want. You've got an objective.
Yep.
The world is your oyster. And
Yep.
then reality starts to hit in. Maybe the venue gets a flood and one of
Mm.
your star speakers suddenly drops out.
No, sorry. Yeah, that just hit home for me. I used to run events and you got me with that one. Continue. Yeah.
Like, I'm on the board of a not for profit, and we have a big holiday party every single year. And we had a very, very famous person who was signed up to come, and then the last minute, for like very valid reasons, couldn't. And so then you're left, oh my God, like, how are we going to solve for this? Like, what are we going to say? You don't want to let people down. You're trying to still do this all fundraising.
Yep.
It's tough. And, then on top of all of that, you're trying to manage budgets, and you're trying to wrangle people, and you're trying to make sure that all of the communication piece is there. And I think if anybody hasn't organized an event before, really think about it in terms of organizing a big party or a wedding or something. I think
Yeah.
anybody who's got married appreciates going to weddings so much more after they themselves have organized a wedding, because they understand the stress that goes into that, and thinking about
Absolutely.
everything from, like, where are people going to park? Where are they going to stay? Dietary requirements. I mean, the dietary requirement question piece in itself is enough to, like, make people go slightly mad. And so when you're
Yep.
thinking about that on a higher level, it's even more insane. So yes, it's a crazy piece. And then you're also thinking about it afterwards as well. And, how can you, or, obviously during you have the logistics and you're trying to capture content, but then how do you keep that event alive afterwards so that the buzz
Mhm.
remains? You can still show the value that you provided. You can still help your audience, and then use that again as a tool for your next event. So it's never
Mhm.
just that 5 hours, 10 hours, 2 hours, whatever it might be, multi-days, weeks and months in the build up sometimes, and then the same on the back end.
It's hard. And, event planning is not given the kind of, I mean, people know if they have a really big wedding that you need an event planner, or it's a good idea because there's a lot of logistics. And like you said, weddings really do teach you if you ever get married. I mean, a lot of people have never been married, so they don't know what it's like to organize a wedding. For those who have, I think you nailed it. And it's interesting how it manages to combine so many different difficult things. It's like working in a restaurant. We talked about it's like that because there's the food, like there's the dietary thing, and did the person get the right food they ordered, like at a wedding or something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
had so I say that, and I had started a kind of semi nonprofit. It was going to become a nonprofit, but I never really fully went there with it, right? But it was a performance that it featured performing artists from around the sort of multi-state area. I just, like you said, that blank canvas. I rented a performance hall that was like pretty big, had a big stage and a lot of room. And after a couple years, we sold that out every year, and we would raise a lot of money. We would give it to breast cancer research. And
Amazing.
anyway, yeah. What's funny about it though was I think about the little things you said about people got the wrong food, and this performer is supposed to go on next and they're in traffic. And I was at another event where there was a panel of judges and one judge just walked out and quit in the middle of the event. So it's always funny, just like you could never guess what'll go wrong. There's so many more things than what you would imagine, I guess, is maybe my takeaway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah.
If it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Yeah, that's the story of events, right? If it can go wrong, it will.
Yeah.
I think that's the theme song. Absolutely. Cool. Well, I appreciate that because I think it's important to keep that in mind and just to remember that, event hosts, I figure since you're someone who's really near and dear to that as a friend of event hosts, as somebody who works closely with them, I guess
Yeah,
I just
and
feel
who
like it's
hosts their own
important.
events as well, you know? So
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah,
really the origin story for Meeting 10. It's like I was solving a problem that I had myself from all of these
yep,
hosts, sorry, from
yep,
all of these events. And yeah,
yep.
it's like you feel the pain. You're walking in their shoes.
What are some of the tell us a little bit about some of the I know it's tough because if you work with lots of event hosts as they're sort of giving them some superpowers with Meet in 10 to help them have a better event. What are some of your favorite events in New York City? The things that, this is a blank canvas. This whole podcast is for the purpose of telling people stories. And so I feel like
Uh-huh.
you're somebody who has a curated view of like really cool events that you're helping other people with in New York City. Tell us a little bit about that, just in specifics.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many different things going on. I mean, alongside everything that I do, I actually curate an events website listing site called Founder Events NYC, where we showcase different things that are going on in the city, specifically for startup founders. So, I mean, even within that range, you see everything from obviously a co-ed day and a happy hour, but then you have empanada making. There's a lot of activities going on right now. So many run clubs, like painting. Painting is a big one that people are starting to do more of. Book clubs. I met somebody day before yesterday who runs a classical literature book club. So they're reading, I guess, like
Nice.
Anna Karenina and, various different things of that genre. Um,
Nice.
you're seeing many more, I would say like more cultural things,
Mm, mhm,
like
mhm,
outside of even just, the startup space, anything that's talking about politics and relationships. And I don't just mean like
mhm,
in a partisan way, but just as in how have things changed over time, like
mhm,
globally, and so you may
mhm,
have professors from various different universities just talking about their subjects and their expertise. There's an amazing community event series here called Lectures on Tap, and
mhm.
they and not just in New York, I know they're in Boston and a few different cities as well. So I would highly recommend looking them up. But what they do is they invite different professors and experts on different topics to come and to a room of like 50 or 100 people or something in a bar, in a library, wherever,
Mm,
they give a
mm.
talk. And so that could be on anything from I've seen taxidermy, I've seen the social media algorithm, I've
Yep.
seen talking about is there life after death? Like the variety of subjects that come up there is really quite extreme. And then I'm going to South by Southwest, my very first South by
Nice.
this coming, I guess next month. This time next month I'll be there. And I saw that people are even hosting, I guess it makes sense, it's Texas, but as like shooting meetups as well. And I was like, that's not something that I would ever see in New York, but somebody is holding a specifically female founder meetup for people to go to a gun range. So that really speaks to the gamut of variety of events.
It's less surprising with men, but I was once on a Texas shooting adventure with like 20 other guys. So that's, I hope you join and have a good time. No, I'm just, yeah. So interesting. So, I almost feel like it's not the intent to make this podcast about AI. However, I feel like it's so relevant as we think about community, we think about the importance of human connection. All of our spaces on social media have been invaded by robots that are pretending
Yeah.
to be people. And it's kind of really weird. I mean, it's
Hmm.
almost a little scary in a certain way. And so something that comes up a lot is this idea that people will experience like a shift because it's like work's going to kind of get done magically by robots or an AI or something like that. And so then people are just going to have this sort of utopia. It's like I have my thoughts about this, but rather than bias you, I want you to go first and just kind of share a little bit about, what are your thoughts on just where we are in the sort of march of human progress in society. We've talked a lot about community and how human connection
Hmm.
is important. And, what are your thoughts around? Because I feel like with your comment you just made, you're saying that you feel like there's a bit of a shift or evolution in sort of the topic of sort of what these events are, if that makes sense, right? I think that's kind of what you were saying, right? And I it makes me wonder about that part. That's why I bring it up, right? That part about like, is it becoming true that people have to work less? AI kind of magically does your job for you. Now you get to go out, enjoy yourself. I mean, I'm very on the fence in different ways about this. So I'm curious what you think.
I mean, I'm a firm believer that AI isn't going to steal people's jobs. I think it's people using AI that's going to
Sure.
take people's jobs. And,
Yeah, sure.
it's obviously not just about job replacement either. It's about job creation. And, you think about prompt engineers and helping people get the most out of these systems and, everything that you could imagine. And so I think AI is an amazing tool and it makes things much more efficient. But I don't think that events are coming to the fore because people now have so much time, that their full-time job that used to take 8 hours is now taking 1 hour. And so they can just,
Yeah.
take all afternoon off on Thursday and Friday. I think it's more just that because we spend so much time in front of a screen, we need to, as humans, get out into the world much more. We need to
Yep.
be with our people, and we need to, whether or not you can really fully comprehend it or put it into words, you feel the energy when you're next to other people. Like you just feel that magnetism almost, even if you're
Mm-hmm.
introverted, you sort of feel that warm and fuzzy feeling that can come from a good conversation, just from being close to
Mm.
somebody. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a really big part of it. And I also think, another part of it is like it's still relationship building because that's a way of differentiating why you. When a system or a tool or whatever is a dime a dozen, and you can go out and you can go and buy whatever system
Mm-hmm.
you want, the one that you're more likely to choose is going to be the one that you have a personal connection to. And that doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be,
Mm-hmm.
a software conversation. That could be when you're buying a house. That could be when you're buying a
Yep.
car. You can all buy cars online now, but you're
Mm-hmm.
much more likely to buy it from the person that you feel like you've got a good relationship with. And so I think that for me is one of the reasons why events are becoming so much more important. And I think it almost becomes then that events are a new luxury. Like you spend the time to invest in the same way that we invest more in perhaps physical books and magazines than we were
Mm-hmm.
at one point when we thought everything was going to be digital and it was all just going to be Kindles and Nooks
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And the same thing with like live music and concerts. Yes, we could keep listening to, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, way back, records and tapes and MP3,
Mm-hmm.
but really we just want to be there and we want to be in the mosh pit or at the stage dancing,
Mm-hmm.
singing,
Mm-hmm.
because there is that energy from that.
Yeah, I love that take, and I'm glad that I didn't say too much first, which sometimes I can make the mistake of doing, because you kind of said what I say all the time without prompting, which is that, we're both working in the events space. I built an events platform, and my thinking is that the world will continue to still be hybrid, and sort of like virtual will always be a key component, right? It's too significant, the fact that I live in one city and nobody else who I work with lives there, and yet I have this job. I work with these people every day. And for me, just personally, I cannot tell people I can't explain to people how much I love the mountains. So I see the
Hmm.
mountains in four directions from my house. I live literally less
I
than
love
like
that.
about an hour in four directions from mountains. And I love that. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. And so that is just a long way of saying that I think that with virtual being important, what ends up happening is it increases the urgency about how we spend the time that we do have to get out of the house, like on a Thursday night or something like that. And so, a lot of what I think about is similar to you, about how I can optimize that so that people have a good experience and can find connection in those spaces where they know it's not at the water cooler anymore for me, right? Like at my day job, but yet I want to get out of the house, and I want to
Hmm.
be able to discover what to do in that spot, So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's
However, I think,
that's my
or,
soapbox.
sort of, but building on that, I think because people nowadays are so used to being able to hide behind a screen, quite literally, screens don't really talk back too often. And tools like Meet and 10 can be helpful because it helps break down the stress of that conversation and being the first person to say hello. I mean, dating apps have the same challenges for that too.
Yep, yep.
And then also, people are are used to having intermediaries in their lives. Like they're used to,
Hmm.
being given permission, or well, continuing the dating analogy, you have your app first and you swipe left or right depending on whether you're going to speak to that person. And so I think it's a really interesting time as we relate to or think about the digital, the physical, and how the two go alongside each other.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. So I think we're kind of like we're sort of at time here, and I wish that I was, not Joe Rogan in the sense that he's a role model, but that I had 3 hours to just, go deep forever with people. But that said, I want to just give a final, very, very blank space for you to just. This is about telling the story of the guest. That's what I want it to be about. And so, is there anything else that we didn't cover? Anything that you want to share or promote that you're working on that we didn't talk about, or anything else that you just want to say as sort of parting words?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I run the Knowledge Shop, which is the founder community. I do meet in 10, but then the passion project is Brits in Tech as well. So if anybody is in New York and happens to be originally from the UK, or, part of the British diaspora in some way and interested in tech, like message me or look me up. You can find us on LinkedIn. Yeah, in a similar way to the way I support founders, I just love bringing people together. And we've done some fun events, like we did something with the British consulate recently, and planning out actually I think a debate on AI. Like we're going to do a debate on whether or not AI should be regulated. So that will be quite a fun one. But yeah, that's my new passion project that's been going for about a year.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, do you get many people that are not British at the Brits in Tech meetup? Because I'm not British, so.
We get a few, but they've all got a British connection. So maybe they lived
Yeah,
there for
yeah,
a bit,
sure,
they
sure.
studied there for a bit, they're married to a
Yeah,
Brit,
yeah,
their grandparents were British, whatever it might be. But
got it,
yeah,
got it.
the
Cool.
majority
Okay.
are passport carrying.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. All right, great. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us today, Tori. Really loved hearing your story, and I hope that as we both think about events and how important it is to just see people in the flesh, I hope that it serves as some kind of spark for somebody out there who hears this.
Yeah, so do I. I'm a big believer in events. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Okay, cheers. Thank you.